Canon shipped the R5 Mark II on August the 20th, and then just 10 days later, I told you we would be getting a firmware update just 1 month later. And it's now the middle of September. So when will it arrive? Well, stick around after this short message for all the details. But before we get to the details, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps this channel grow, and keeps you up to date on the latest camera coverage. I've been very fortunate over the last year to develop several reliable sources for information on the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, the Canon EOS R1, and various lenses. And so I'd like to start off this video by thanking all my sources, those people who overheard things and passed it on to me. Thank you an awful lot. I was the first to get the release date, or sorry, the announcement date of the R5 Mark II and the R1 being July the 17th, a week before anybody else. And then on August the 30th, just 10 days, just 10 days after the announcement or the shipping date of the R5 Mark II, I was told that Canon will be releasing a firmware update for the R5 Mark II just 1 month later. And now here we are in the middle of September, and some of you have been asking me, Simon, where's that firmware update that you promised? Well, I'm happy to report that according to, well, I got some validation this morning, and it's thanks to Canon rumors. It should come as no surprise, but the Canon EOS R5 Mark II will be getting a firmware update in the near future. We do know that the new firmware is being tested by numerous friends of Canon. So what are the details about this new firmware update? What is it going to provide in terms of enhancements and bug fixes? Well, back in August the 30th, my source had told me that not to expect any major enhancements or new features, but to expect a rather large correction of bug fixes. And I've certainly noticed a few issues myself. Nothing show-stopping, of course. Nothing that couldn't be fixed by restarting the camera. But Canon Rumors says otherwise. We weren't privy to the firmware release notes. However, it's obvious that they're cleaning up a lot of bugs that people have experienced. However, we were told that there will be a worthwhile feature update or two. And that would be great if there were some enhancements to go along with the bug fixes. I think I speak for most professionals out there, or anybody who got the R5 Mark II. And our primary focus right now is not on necessarily new enhancements, but to definitely get all those niggly bugs out of the way. So that, as far as we know in terms of the scope of the firmware update, that's about it. A couple of enhancements, which my source didn't say, but Canon Rumors is, and they're closer to the announcement date, which we'll get to in just a moment, or sorry, the release date of the firmware. However, I do have one other update. A source came by and told me just a couple of days ago that the LP-E6P batteries, we're going to be getting a whole bunch of those shipped shortly, probably also around the time of the firmware update. I wasn't told exactly when, but definitely before the end of the month. So, when can we expect the new firmware update to be released? Well, you can expect it sometime before September the 26th, and that's the ship date for the new RF 28 to 70mm f2.8 image stabilized STM. And once again, I want to thank all my sources for providing me with information, and if you've overheard anything regarding this firmware update or anything else regarding Canon, Sony, Nikon, Panasonic, or even Pentax, then please go ahead and reach out to me using my email address on the main page of this channel. So this is very important. You can consider this a public service announcement because people get excited by firmware updates, and by and large, these firmware updates go off without a hitch. However, sometimes they can brick the camera or make it very difficult to use. I talked about firmware 1.3.0, I was going to say 1.3.1, that fixed 1.3.0, and that was for the R6 a couple of years back. Canon released a new firmware update and it fixed it, but basically the camera would brick, you'd have to pull the battery and get it to work again if you were shooting in certain modes. And then, of course, I told you a couple of weeks back about a story where Sony wanted to charge a user to fix the camera, a minimum charge of around $700, and that included shipping. Why? Well, you see, even though the camera was purchased used and had a warranty, the person downloaded and applied a firmware update. And basically, it rendered the camera useless in various shooting modes. And just recently, we've heard about another firmware update for Sony cameras that have, how shall we say, made people's day worse than it had started. So while Canon hasn't released this firmware update at present, what I recommend is don't apply it right away. Let's wait a week or two because, again, the R5 Mark II is still pretty early on. We want to wait until, I would say, a week or two after the firmware update has been released to see if there's any issues. Now, what I'm going to do is, because I think it's my duty to let you know if there's any issues, I do have a backup camera, the R5 Mark I, which I'm shooting with right now. I'm going to apply the firmware update and see if there's any immediate issues with the firmware update. And then, of course, I'm going to shoot with it day after day to see if there are any issues. And then what I would do is, after about a week or two, if you haven't heard anything from me, any other websites, or the media in general about any issues, then I think it's pretty safe to go ahead and update the firmware. But I say this every time I talk about firmware updates, but I think as soon as I get through that first minute or two about talking about the features in the firmware, people just click off and they download and apply it. I've found Canon to be very good with their firmware updates. Since the R5 came out, they've been releasing, I think they released something like 12 firmware updates for that camera. I think there were 2 potential issues. With one of them, we weren't exactly sure what it was because the firmware update, it didn't, I'm trying to remember now. I don't know if it was 1.8.1. They didn't release 1.8.0. They went right to 1.8.1. So whatever the issue was, they caught it and then just updated the firmware and sent it out. But they'd gotten further enough along that it got the 1.8.1. I think that was the one. It could have been 1.9.1. So there are issues. We've seen it with Canon. We've seen it with other companies. So please take the time. Don't rush to update. And don't forget to subscribe and follow, because as soon as there is an update, I'll let you know and I'll publish a video. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have yourself a great day, a great week, and we'll see you again soon.